Kia ora everybody and welcome back to the Good Day Matrix. My name is Daz and I'm very excited today to be here at Datacom with Husain. He's a third culture kid and he'll fill us in on that soon. He's a father of 3 and a husband. He's a leader of change and transformation for equity, inclusion, partnership and capability building in the communities that he's a part of. Husain is the chair of the Board of Trustees for the Datacom Foundation as well as being the Associate Director for Innovation and Growth. He is a force of nature. I'm very, very excited to be here talking to him today, and I know there's going to be so many things that people will take away from this today, just from the one conversation I had with you a few weeks ago. So thank you so much for your time today, Husain.
Thank you, and I'm humbled by the introduction. I never thought of myself as a force of nature.
Force of nature. Force of nature. When we talk wellness at the Good Day Matrix, we talk about 5 different pillars of body, mind, identity, community, and environment. And often people think that it's just our body and our mind that we need to sort of have a harness on or be doing things to help support those, but actually it's all those different things of connecting and how our environment's making us feel. So we'll weave through those pillars today and we'll kick off with body. Do you have any rituals or any things that you do to take care of your body?
My more recent ritual has been running. So I've historically not taken very good care of my body and I've kind of taken it for granted. I had a really big wake up moment, I suppose, off the back of the March 15 attacks. It triggered lots of things for me, that event, but one of the things that it did trigger is my sense of presence for my family, and so my body was one of those things that I realized that I need to take better care of. So I got myself a personal trainer and started to listen to what he actually said, which was good. Obviously, looking after my food was a big part of it because I'm Middle Eastern and we have really good food and we love eating food, and so food was a big part of my life, but my problem was I wasn't really regulating myself and wasn't conscious about how much and what it is I was eating. So that was a big part of the change in looking after my body. As I got into a habit for about 1.5 years actually of recording daily on MyFitnessPal every single thing that I eat, which was, it got to become a good habit, but what it made me do is now I don't use it anymore, but I'm very conscious of, my calorie intake in the day. I lost 15 kilos during 2019 and got myself more fit, and then I decided to, for some reason, run a half marathon, which never happened last year because of the pandemic. So hopefully that will happen in a month's time in Auckland. But running is definitely my ritual now. So I do about 3 runs a week. And they're long runs, so I do kind of 2 1-hour and 1 2-hour runs, and they're really good time for me to be just a little bit free, be able to think, and I usually do listen to podcasts while I'm doing it, not because I want to be distracted, but it kind of, it gives me a trigger to explore some things that I have in my mind that I don't necessarily get the time to explore.
That's wonderful, and that's a great lead into us with mind. But it is great, like we talk about meditation often, and people think that it's just sitting down and being really quiet, but meditation can be anything that is calming of the mind. So if that's running with a podcast, like that's brilliant. That's so awesome. So around mind, so you're a practicing Muslim, so talk to us about what that means to you and what that does for your mind.
Yeah, so my faith is something that I probably didn't wake up to until kind of my early 20s, and there was rituals that we did, and we got taught things when we were young, but being able to be conscious about it wasn't something that I really got into until I got older, and it kind of morphed and evolved as I got older and older, and now that I have children, it's taken a completely different shape as well. But my faith helps me with a couple of things. One is a bit of grounding in the fact that I get perspective. I get the fact that I don't, the world doesn't necessarily always revolve around me, and I play a role within a wider ecosystem. And I think that perspective is important, because sometimes we can get very, we can get a lot of anxiety, we can get really hung up on certain things where we think, it's do or die in a moment, but having that perspective to go, actually you're playing a part in a much bigger thing, and that grounding is really important. So it helps me with that from a mindset perspective. The other thing that it helps me with is just having some, I guess, clearer boundaries, and things that I can kind of go, those are the things that make me comfortable, and I don't need to think about these certain things, and I can communicate some of those boundaries and also live with them and just be happier. And they're hard, because it's life around you is not compatible, especially with our faith. Living in a Western society, to be honest, life is not compatible. At a very basic example, the financial system in the Western world, the capitalist system, is completely incompatible with Muslim faith. Wow. So the concept of interest, which the whole financial system is based on, is fundamentally forbidden in our faith. You cannot make money off money. Wow. And that's all got to do with kind of people abusing the system, and debt being really frowned upon. But that's completely incompatible with the Western world, and so what do you do in terms of how you invest your money? How do you what's your outlook on providing for your children and building things for future generations? Those are all considerations that we've got to grapple with in very different ways. But they are, I've accepted the fact, for example, that I'm not, property investment is not a thing for me, because the concept of mortgage for your own house has been kind of more readily accepted to go, okay, to secure a place to live for your own self is okay. But for you to be making money off, borrowing money is not okay. And so, and so for me, I've put that as a boundary, and I don't need to kind of, worry myself about that. And I think those are really, I don't know, I think they're healthy things, because then you're just kind of happier that you're not stressing about, certain aspects that you just feel, okay, that's not a thing I'm gonna fiddle with.
To engage with, and that's almost an integrity thing too, isn't it? You just can draw the line in the sand, and there's no, maybe this part will be all right, or those blurred lines. Like, no, this is what we've set up, and we're.
And it's not a self-righteous thing, because actually, you could argue, we're doing ourselves a disservice by not engaging with it, but there is definitely a deep, sense of happiness around going, you know what, that's just a thing I'm not going to think about. I don't need to.
That's not it.
I can put that away, and that's not a thing I need to worry about. So I think those boundaries are really helpful for for how I approach my life, but also
Yeah.
how I approach work.
Yeah, and I suppose also, I mean, being a practicing Muslim, because we talked about that a little bit around work and prayer that needs to, well, that you do during the day. So how do you balance that? Has that been a bit easier now with sort of the work from home?
From home
Yeah.
situation? Definitely, definitely I think easier at home. Actually, my work has been really good. So when we moved into this building, this office of ours in Auckland, I had the privilege of having an input into the design, and so we've got a quiet space for people, which is used by our Muslim colleagues for prayers as well. So the space is not an issue. The challenge is the time and the ability to disconnect, which is a struggle. Like, you know, the boundary is there for me in terms of like, this is something that I know I need to do, but to be able to do it and also to be able to be present while doing it is a struggle. It's definitely a struggle. But there are things like, Fridays we have mass prayers, so we congregate in a prayer space and listen to a sermon, and that to me is a untouchable time, and so everybody at work kind of knows that's a time where I'm away, and it's only 45 minutes in the day, but it's just having those points to yourself where you go, okay, I'm not gonna sacrifice that
this
time.
is my non-negotiable. And I think a lot more people can learn from that, not just through having like boundaries that have come from religion or from different cultural things, but setting up those times that are non-negotiables to have quiet time or to go for a walk, like knowing that you can say those things because it's going to benefit your mind and it's going to benefit you having clarity, then to be able to sort of steadfastly go, no, I did say I can't do that, so I won't be able to do that. So, almost the confidence or conviction to say, no, it's not going to fit with me. Yeah.
And I think the modern, the post-pandemic flexible working has kind of brought that to the forefront, because you no longer see people as often, and that's got a real impact in terms of, you're not able to build social capital with people. And the realization that actually the time that you spend with people one-on-one in a coffee shop or going out for lunch or going for a walk is actually valuable time. You don't have to fill that time with a work thing fully. It's actually okay for you to take just that time to, and the same thing with time for yourself. So I think it has helped bring that realization forward that having the time for yourself and having time where you're investing in developing relationships is an acceptable form of work.
100%. And appreciating that gift of time from someone else, I think, is just like that gratitude that's really awesome that we actually do get to spend this time together and that they've taken that time and I've taken that time, so let's enjoy it and be not going, when I'm finished here, I've got to do X, Y, and Z, and then I'm going to go pick up the kids, and just be. Which takes us again nicely into sort of communities and that connection. So it's really important, we talk about this all the time, to be able to think diversely from what you're used to and try and come out of that box. And the communities are a great way for us to engage with different groups, engage with different thought-provoking people who just challenge our thinking, and it's not an argument's sake, but it's just to try and see the world in different ways. And I love how you talk about perspective. It's one of my favourite things to talk about. So talk to us about sort of some of the communities that you're a part of and what you do within them and what you can learn from them.
I've never thought about my communities in a very deliberate way. I've kind of always engaged with different people in different communities, and I think that's come from a little bit of my journey as well. I was born in Iraq. We moved away from Iraq after the Second Gulf War, so living through that time of uncertainty and war and seeing your parents having to adapt to different conditions, and then moving from that community that I had in Iraq, where I had lots of family, lots of cousins, and suddenly leaving everything behind and going somewhere else. We went to Jordan, we had to reestablish ourselves there, and had to form new communities and connections over there. And then we left Jordan 4 years afterwards and came to New Zealand, and again I had to form new communities here. And I think, I never, only when I step back and look at it, like I've been engaging with different communities all along. And so that's something that I really appreciate now. I've got different communities in my life. Obviously my tight community and tight unit is my family. But I've got, my faith-oriented community, so the Muslim community. I've got my Arab community, white Arabs, and how we engage. Myself, I'm Iraqi. My wife is actually Palestinian, and so that the groups that I end up interacting with are fairly diverse as well in those communities. From a technology perspective, Datacom is a big community. I've been here for almost 18 years, and so over that time I've developed connections all across the organization, and that sense of community is really important for me, and it culminates in things that we do for the company and for the people. So 10 years ago we started going off on a tangent,
No, we love tangents.
10 years ago we started a idea around how might we revive some of our culture, and we held a hackathon, which is really, it's getting people together and problem solving and we do it over a weekend. And the tradition just, everybody got excited by it, and the tradition kept going. 10 years later, here we are. So we started it with 40 people in Auckland in the first time. And, this year we had 200 people in Auckland, 100 in Sydney, and 50 online.
Wow.
And it was the first kind of, live Trans-Tasman hackathon that's
cool.
being run, which is quite, it's quite cool. But, I've had people come out of that in different teams at Datacom going, this has been the best experience in my entire career.
That's so cool.
And so that's really, that's amazing. That's really, really cool. So developing, that to me is really important, developing that sense of community within the organization, and then developing the community outside of the organization, looking at how do we, what are the collective missions that we have and responsibilities that we have as a technology community in Aotearoa, and how might we develop those better. So I recently joined the industry advisory group for Take Tamaki Makaurau, which is all about how do we shape the future talent pool and the future workforce in Aotearoa. I'm pretty passionate about that topic, and then my last kind of community is really the global community, because I'm still I've still got that. You said that the third culture kid. I love my overseas connections, and as an example, in 2019, I got the privilege of attending a 3-month course at Harvard Business School in the US, which was awesome. And I did that with 150 leaders from all around the world. And we've got a great WhatsApp group, and we catch up regularly online. And we're actually just planning a informal reunion, which is really, really cool. And the connections out of that have been so good. I've helped people, I'm advising people with their business ideas, helping them connect with other folks, whether overseas or here. And that sense of community is really important for me. So so there's so kind of different levels of community that I've shaped, and that's something that I cherish a lot. That's something that's really dear to my heart, and I work pretty hard on trying to nurture those and cultivate those communities.
And when we talked, and this is sort of going to be the last part of this section, but when we talked, you mentioned about the March shootings and what happened with what Datacom did when you came back in that conversation of, so what do we do?
Yeah.
But how, so that's a twofold part, so sort of talk to us about that, but also we have diverse communities here in Aotearoa, and it's something we should be incredibly proud of.
Yeah.
And it's something that pains me so deeply when people tell me the different racisms that they've faced and different prejudices that are still out there, which I just don't, there's just no need, but so talk to us, is there anything that people can be more aware of or people can be doing, whether it's during their hiring processes or within their workplaces, to be more inclusive and try and decimate racism and divisiveness?
I've been on this journey for the last few years of engaging with, the I don't know what you want to call it, but this awakening, I suppose, of where we've come from as a country, and the engagement with fertility, and what is loosely being called the decolonization effort to go, okay, how do we have a restorative conversation around the injustices of the past, and how do we shape a more inclusive future? And I work a lot with our kaupapa Māori partners, and they talk about what's good for Māori is good for everyone. And my take on that is actually this concept of partnership and te tiriti is really important, not just for the historic two parties that need to co-govern this country, but actually for people like myself and my parents and my community who entered the country at a later stage. And to be honest, when we entered it, I'm the son of migrants, and my parents were educated in the UK, and we had a colonized mindset of the West is kind of here, and we aspired to get to that. And so racism was almost like it's a thing you just deal with. It was like, oh yeah, that's the price that we pay for being in a much better society than the one we had. And I think that concept is fundamentally flawed, and I think that's what the journey that Māori are on in New Zealand, kind of waking people up to go, that's the way people have been thinking, and that's not actually okay. And so I think that's that concept of partnership, I think, is really important. So creating the space for other communities and other people, especially ones that have long-standing tradition, which spans hundreds of years. Now when I introduce myself, I say I'm from the earliest known part of civilization, because Iraq is actually that's where the earliest origins of civilization was, and so being proud of that tradition, rather than going, oh, that's a backwards thing and I need to look at a more progressive view. I think being proud of that tradition is something that we haven't been able to do, and so allowing that to come out in an authentic way, and it's not about people trying it on. It's not about, and I think I've had a lot of my Māori colleagues and friends tell me, people don't need you to be Māori. They don't need you to be speaking reo fluently and things like that, but people need you to be a good te tiriti partner. So you've got to think about how am I creating the space, and how am I helping with creating more inclusive communities. And so I think that's a really fundamental shift that both, everybody needs to have. Even within our community, I challenge people in my community to go, actually, hey, by the way, we came in with this mindset. We've got to change that mindset. There has to be a sense of pride in our own traditions. So I think I don't think it's I don't think it's on one party to do. I think it's those who have the privilege at the moment, as well as those who may not. But I definitely think there's more we could be doing in terms of driving that equity conversation, and that shows up in different ways. It shows up with different, in tech, women, it's a big thing. Like I interviewed someone for a really senior role at Datacom last year, and the first thing she said to me is, I wasn't sure if I was, if I was skilled enough for, I can't remember the exact words, but she said, I wasn't sure if I was, if I had the right experience and skills for this job. And holy crap, she had all the right experience, for this job. So, tackling that and changing the narrative around that, not kind of, this conversation around the pay gap is really important. Not in an interview process, not going into, how much are you after? I've had to have a wake up call around that to go, actually, we've got set roles, and the roles have a certain bandwidth, and I still think that's not something that's widely done in business. So I think changing some of those habits and some of those rituals, and from an equity perspective, I think creating the safety in the workplace is really important, because a lot of and I was talking to one of our again kaupapa Māori partners last week, and they was talking about the dropout rates of people who get the qualifications and they go to work and they drop out, and then they go to hospitality instead of tech. And it's just, it's shockingly sad, and it's because we're not creating the right environment in pastoral care. We're not equipping teams with the knowledge to know how to embrace different people and how to create that safe environment. I think that's something that we need to do more of. I think I find safety as my number one thing. Like having psychological safety, like that is a pretty hard boundary for me at work. If anybody violates that boundary, I'll be having a pretty stern conversation with them, even if they're not part of if they're a partner, or if they're somebody else within the business, I'd have that word with them. So creating that safety for people to be their authentic selves and bring themselves is something that's still not well understood.
I've just finished reading Adam Grant. It's called Originals.
Okay.
And there's a part in it, and he talks. It's like he's got looked down the barrel of a camera, and he's looking at every boss and every employer, and he's gone, we need to stop doing exit interviews and start doing entry interviews, because that's the point where, like, they've chosen, say Datacom, so they've chosen to come and interview and potentially work here, and there's a reason why. And it might be that, smoke and mirrors, it might look really great from the outside and they get the job, and then within 2 or 3 weeks they start to go, this culture isn't quite what I thought it was going to be, or like one of their steadfast values is this, but actually no one's doing that, so that starts to chip away at them. And so he's recommending that people do that in the front end, because they're the ones who can actually lead the culture, because they're coming with fresh eyes, and if they're told these are our 4 non-negotiable values, but this one is falling off miserably, then that person gets that space to go, hey, I've got a few ideas about it, or here's my experience so far, so that you can capture that early, and they can actually be the change makers, and they can be the voices that go, or flip side is entry interview, and they're like, it's so awesome, everything that you guys said happens here is great, and that's well done team, and keep going. But at the same time, they might just have another little suggestion that just might strengthen that little part of the culture further, or that part of practice. So it's really similar lines of that too, is giving people the opportunity to have a voice regardless of entry level position or C-level and everything else. So.
And doing that in a big organization is really hard. I started a team at Datacom called the Foundry back in 2017, and it was all about looking at new ways of doing things, the art of the possible, and exploring alternative approaches to strategy with our customers. And it was, the ways of working were really based around forming trust and co-creation with organizations. And that is quite different to how things are done within the wider organization. And so providing a level of protection for the team to do that work and create that safety within a wider scope, that's really hard, but that's our duty as leaders. And I think leaders need to embrace that, to go, I've got to make sure I'm creating that safety for my team to be themselves, to raise the shortcomings that we have, and develop a culture where it's good to raise problems. I think that's one of the big things in New Zealand specifically, is we don't really have that problem. We love pats on the back. We love celebrating wins. We hate talking about failures, and I think that's the thing that we've got to get better at doing, is kind of going, great, things are going well, but what else could we improve? Because there's always stuff
challenge,
things to improve.
Right, we'll move to identity. So we know that it's critical to know who you are and where you've come from, because it affects so much of our lives. The triggers that we have for different things, we need to understand where those things come from, so that we can be managing ourselves in different environments, or how we cope with pressure, or all of the different things that we've learnt along the way. So tell us about where you started and how you've come to New Zealand, and everything in between about your identity.
Yeah, so I guess I was born to, so my mum and dad, they are academics, so they're both university lecturers, and so we were a middle class family in Iraq, pretty ordinary upbringing. Iraq in the 80s was an interesting place, because it had a real growth trajectory, and then the geopolitical situation changed, and they went to war, and the government turned into a dictatorship, and all these things began to shift. So that the identity part of that has been quite interesting, because being a child raised in that environment, you couldn't say what it is that you really wanted to say. So we've had family members, disappear. People would disappear, like if they're talking about the government in a negative way, or whatever it might be, they would disappear. And it got to a point, like I think in the 1990, where you just couldn't trust anybody anymore. So you couldn't trust your neighbor. Your neighbor could be communicating things about you to the government. Your extended family could be doing that. So, I remember my parents kind of, if they were to have some of those conversations in front of me, they would have to kind of, ingrain into us, like not to say any of this. Anywhere outside. And so like when I was even younger than that, I grew up with some certain ideals that they used to push onto us in schools, and my parents would just leave me be, like they wouldn't expose me to the truth at all. And really funny story, but I've got an aunt who lives in Canada, in Montreal, and my cousins were born there. So she moved out of Iraq ages ago, and I visited them in 2019 for the first time in Montreal. We met each other once in Manchester in the UK in 1990, just before the Gulf War. And so I was what, like 7 years old at the time, and they were like, "Oh man, it was so funny because you were like this patriotic young boy, And I was like, "What are you talking about? I had no recollection of some of the things that I used to say as a child. And so that's, I'm just kind of giving you a sense of growing up with this idea of you've got to put on a different persona and change hats and be really good at that. Then we left Iraq and we went to Jordan, and Jordan was a place that really, people in Jordan really celebrated Saddam Hussein. They loved Saddam Hussein. And so, I kind of came out with this, we've just left our house and everything behind and our family, and we literally packed suitcases, put them on a car and drove out of Iraq and left it forever. And we restarted our lives. And so I could see my family's gone through all this hardship, but these people were celebrating the very person that caused this to happen. And, my parents would be like, no, don't say anything bad about the Iraqi government, even when we were out of Iraq. And then in Jordan, it's a predominantly, so from a faith perspective, it's a predominantly, so by the way, the whole Sunni and Shia thing that people hear about in the Islamic faith was not a massive deal, but the sectarian tensions that get brought on by politicizing these things have made it a much bigger deal. So, in my family, my family is mostly Shia, but we've had, there's intermarriages that happen and all of that kind of stuff. And so I never knew that I was Shia or Sunni until I was much later on in Jordan. And my family were pretty cautious about announcing the fact that we're Shia because it was not a friendly place for people. And so, this notion of having to hide your true identity was there from very early on. And then we moved to New Zealand and it was the same thing. It was like, you've got to abide by, even though there's freedoms, but there's this societal, the social contracts in society. And so, you've got to try and fit yourself in. And so by trying to fit in, you have to leave who you really are to the side and try to fit in as much as you can. And so that was a struggle, throughout my whole life. It was, as a child, it was a struggle until really I got to university age, where suddenly I found a whole bunch of people that were similar to me. I was pretty, there was only 3 or 4 Arabs in school when I came here, and we all had very divergent paths. But university age is when I found my people. I found people that were struggling with the same thing as I was. And we formed a new community within the university. We formed an online community called Arab Uni at the time, and that's Arabs at University. And before the days of Facebook and social media, we had an online forum, and that was our social media and our interaction paradigm. And we had a social club within university, and we held events on a regular basis, and movie nights and things like that. That was, I think, one of the that was an awakening moment to go, oh shit, that culture that I kind of left to the side for ages, that's something that's really valuable, and needed to bring that back into my life and be more proud of it. But I'd say my other kind of, fast forward a few years, my other wake up call was having children, and this is again the third culture thing, where I've got my culture that I've inherited from my parents. I've got the culture that I've had to adapt to and live with here in New Zealand, because New Zealand is home. I've not been to Iraq since we left in 1992. I would like to go, but I consider New Zealand my home. And so I've got that second culture of the understanding of the New Zealand landscape. And then the third culture is the culture that I'm co-creating with my community and with my children. And hopefully there's a bit of there's the best of all the cultures that kind of get brought together for the future generations as well. So my kids made me realize how important it is to be role modeling all of those things.
Yeah.
You know, and how important it is to have a very vulnerable conversation, because bless my parents, that was the thing that they didn't feel they could have. You know, they couldn't have that, you know, vulnerable and authentic conversation to go, we don't know how to deal with this stuff, and so we're, you know, we're kind of making these really black and white harsh calls when in fact the world is grey, and it's okay for you to have those conversations with your kids and allow them to know that the world is grey. So yeah, that journey has kind of shaped, I guess, who I am today, and it's still something that I struggle with, like, you know, that sense of wanting to fit in, and that sense of not wanting to you know, to like the shyness of showing my identity and my culture. It still comes through, and the imposter syndrome still comes through, and you know, I still feel, you know, my ability to network with others and things like that is compromised because of some of those things. But that's a personal journey that I'm on to kind of get better at. I think that the one last thing that I want to say about identity is it's a slightly tougher element, but it's around how do you build resilience for people, and you know, all this change has obviously shaped aspects of my identity, but I didn't want to go there, but loss is actually a big part of it as well. So when I was a couple of years after we migrated to New Zealand, my dad passed away, and
we got you.
You know, he was a big part of why we kind of moved out, and you know, he had the foresight to kind of go, let's push in different directions. But I think that sense of loss has also kind of countered, you know, gave me the ability to overcompensate on, you know, what are the things that I really want to push and advocate for. And I think like March 15 really, you know, it was a big blow, and it really reinforced that whole, you know, that whole sense of loss and how it needs to build, how it, you know, how do you use that tragic force of loss to build resilience. I think that's been a really big thing, and I feel like, unfortunately, you know, like March 15 was a very massive event. You know, it is the biggest terror attack that's ever happened on New Zealand soil. So it was a massive event for the country. It was a huge event for the community, because if you think about, you know, the 51 lost and the equal number who were bullet injured, that's 102 individuals out of a really small community. It's massive, and I just wish there was more drive to make some significant changes happen off the back of it, because, you know, I know, you know, like, you know, the government's response and the whole society's response was very empathetic, and I think, you know, all the families, and I've had the real honor of working with a lot of the families. All the families are super grateful for, you know, for the empathy and everything that was shown during that time. But I think the action is what's really important, and I think the action piece, I think as a society we need to get better at, and it's, you know, it's what I touched on earlier, maybe around New Zealand being a place where we like to, pat ourselves on the back and kind of, sweep away some of those uncomfortable conversations. And I think, this is an uncomfortable conversation that we need to constantly raise and talk about, because actually it's not changing for people on the ground. So the families are still experiencing, people in the Muslim community in Christchurch still experience racism. There's kids who experience racism in school, and I just don't feel the sense of urgency around action is there anymore. Everybody had that emotional charge after March 15, and then the pandemic hit, and then it was like, a long, distant thing. So how we leverage loss as a way for us to build resilience and build a bit of determination and the change that we might want to make. I think that's really important.
Yeah, I think people sometimes forget we get angry at the perpetrator of something, and then we forget to be angry for the victims. And I think if we could change the mindset to not just be angry and be like, good, well, that happened to him, good. But actually, how do we become angry for, which means we're empathetic of, and then we want action for, because it's not right, and it's changing our mindsets to not just sort of focus on the bad person that did the one bad thing, but how do we now wrap around and be angry for these people and for this whole community, and then see some significant change. I think if we could try and somehow help people's behaviours and mindsets to shift away from just focusing on the person to the people, then
I mean the narrative that I've experienced with a lot of my colleagues and people that I've interacted with is like there's this sense of it was an Australian guy, it was a person from the outside who came and did this, and I agree with you. I think that's really problematic. And if you speak to the families, and I one of my closest friends, Atta, he was one of the 51 killed. And if you speak to his family, they want to make sure this never happens to anybody else. The families want to make sure this thing doesn't happen to not just the Muslim community, to anybody else. And so they're looking for that advocacy. But I think what we've done is we've kind of gone, we've kind of given the emotional response initially as beautifully as New Zealand can do in a very empathetic way. But then we've kind of gone, okay, let's now move on. That was a black dot in our history. But I think we need to do more. Yeah,
I agree.
I don't know if you watched, there's the Netflix series Colin in Black and White. So Colin, the football player, the NFL player who did the first knee to the national anthem, Kaepernick, Colin Kaepernick.
Yes,
Netflix has helped him produce a 6-episode, I think it was, series called Colin Black and White, and it was about his upbringing because he was adopted by white parents, and so he kind of grew up with this idea that he enjoys the same privileges as his parents. And then it kind of, the layers of the onion begin to unfold around how others perceive him, and then also how his, some of the deep challenges that his parents were dealing with as well. So he didn't even, they had some ingrained biases that they probably didn't consciously think about either. And he talked about this concept of microaggressions. So he talked about how people can sometimes, in a professional environment especially, they will pass these kind of microaggressions, and mostly it's around commentating about culture or heritage, and I think creating awareness around some of those things and what it is that we say, the language that we use, and the rituals that we hold. I think that's really really important.
Yeah.
There's still a lot of cultural bias in work culture here in Aotearoa, and we've got a long way to change that.
Yeah. And that's why we need to speak up and not fear the consequence of challenging the status quo, right?
Yeah.
Right, we'll move to environment. We'll take the. All right, so we'll move to environment. And when we talk about environment, it could be a raft of different things. It could be sustainability, it can be your work environment, your home environment, the environment that you create around yourself. But at the moment, we're obviously facing a lot of work from home change that we haven't ever faced before. So talk us through what that's like in terms of the environment that you're creating at work and at home, and how you're sort of balancing / bringing the two together, I guess.
I'll talk about it in two ways. Maybe I'll talk about it first as a manager and a person who's got responsibility for a team, and then I'll talk about it as an individual. I think so. As a manager, I've always been a believer in creating as I said before, the safety for people to bring their authentic selves, and part of that is actually understanding their individual context and their lives. And I've had I had one of my team members who this was a few years ago, 5 years ago. She was pregnant and she wouldn't tell me because she was afraid that she might not get a promotion or whatever, and when she came back from maternity leave and she instantly came into a higher level position than what she was on before, and she was like, that's really cool, but that doesn't happen very often. So being conscious of people's home commitments and work commitments, and we're very lucky because in my line of work we're knowledge workers, and we're not really, we're not working in a factory or anything like that. There's no critical dependencies as well on us. We're not solving, we're not treating cancer, we're not treating patients, and so so that taking all of that on board and going, we've got to create an environment that provides a level of flexibility. That's something that I believed in before the pandemic. The challenge with the pandemic, with the first lockdown, was how do you know you're doing that effectively when you're not seeing people? Because you could read body language, but you can't really do that over a Teams meeting or a Zoom meeting. So getting some rituals and some tools to help us do that was really, really important. The rituals were both kind of the way we interact with each other and the way we create experiences where we can come together and not have a sense of expectation that this is, we've got to get these things done. Like creating time where people can just kind of come in and just, not have a structure around something was really important. And then we put some tools in actually just to kind of measure how we were doing on a, from a cultural perspective. And there's lots of tools these days around measuring that. But I think having a finger on the pulse to go, how is the team doing? How do we provide a space for anonymous feedback? How do we know if people are struggling at home? That became even more and more important as we started to, to work in different ways. Currently, I lead a team that is dispersed across New Zealand, and we only come, in the places where we have an office, we will come into the office twice a week.
Wow.
And so we've set ourselves up to go, Tuesdays and Thursdays were days we generally try to come in to the office. And that's been really nice because then it's an opportunity for people to go out for coffee, and I encourage the whole team not to book meetings, and especially in the first half of the day. Because what just kind of grinds me is seeing people come into the office and sit down on a Teams or a Zoom meeting, because you can do that at home.
Yeah.
Like, you don't need to be in the office to have a Zoom meeting or a Teams
Yeah.
call. You should come into the office to grab coffee with people, to go and interact with people, to collaborate with people and jump on a whiteboard. You know, those are the things you need to get into the office for. So that's some of the challenges and the shifts we've had to make. We've still got challenges around our equipment, like, you know, we're in a meeting room at the moment, and this meeting room is not equipped for us to have a really good remote conversation. And so if you had 5 people in this meeting room and 2 people online, the 2 people online are getting a very poor experience. And that's something we're pretty passionate about changing. So I think we've got a long way to go with that. I think reimagining the role of the office as well is really important. The role of the office as a place of collaboration, potentially even community engagement. You know, like, how do we create the space for communities to come together in our offices? I think every corporate around town is kind of, you know, still not sure what to do with their office space, which is largely unoccupied, and it's just a complete waste at the moment. So we need to get a bit more creative around how we use the office space and the time in the office. Now, for me as an individual, the pandemic has had some mostly positive effects, I would say, from a working style perspective, because it made me a lot more conscious on the mindset that I bring to my work and you know, how I want to work in different ways. So today, for example, I know I had a last minute change of circumstance, and we're lucky that we can come into the office and have a chat. But I wanted you to come into my house because I had some, you know, I've got some meetings in the afternoon that are remote, and so I don't want to come into the office and sit down, you know, in a small meeting room by myself, talking to people on a computer, when I can do that from home. The benefit of being at home means I can be involved in dropping off my kids to school. I can pick them up. My working times can be a little bit different. You know, my schedule can be different. And so that ability to flex your work around your life, that's been amazing. For me, it reinforced the importance of social capital and building that, and the importance of your network and your relationships. I got taught that, you know, you got to look at your network in 3 different ways. You got to look at it in yourself and how you manage yourself as a leader. You got to look at your team and how you manage your team, and then you got to look at your broader kind of network and how do you manage that. And I think, you know, being deliberate around that just became much more important during the pandemic, because you couldn't just grab coffees with people, especially, you know, us in Auckland, we were locked away last year for a good 3 months. So, you know, you couldn't just go and grab coffee with people, but you had to be a bit more deliberate around scheduling that time to connect with the rest of your network. So I think it just made the responsibility of building social capital even greater for individuals. And
it's great to just sink into it and pay attention and be deliberate with your time, but when you're there, be there, not be 5 other places in your brain. It's so important. Right, I have some quick fire questions for you, Husain, to finish us off today. 3 things that made you smile today.
3 things that made me smile. Seeing my family in the morning always makes me smile. My poor 3-year-old is sick at the moment, but seeing him wake up and give me a hug is, you know, that's my favorite part of the day. Seeing you guys in the office made me smile, and having my coffee in the morning definitely made me smile. I would have loved to have you at my house because I don't know if I mentioned it to you when we first talked, but I was awarded the Auckland Home Barista Champion in 2014.
Oh, why wasn't that on the intro?
So coffee is a big part of my my personal life, and I struggle. I ran out of coffee beans, and I was traveling yesterday, so I was struggling this morning. So when I had my coffee, there was a very big smile on my face.
That is an outstanding fact. Favorite books?
I'm not really a huge book person, and I'd probably go. I'm very nerdy when it comes to the books that I read. They're all work-related books, unfortunately. So I'll rattle off some that really kind of resonate with me. There's one called Naked Consulting.
Yeah.
Which is all about how do you become more vulnerable in the world of consulting. Consultants are always expected to be experts. They're coming in, they've got all the they've already read up on your challenge, and they've got all the recommendations handy. And a big philosophy that I take is not to do that. I hate coming in being positioned as the expert, because I don't know everything, and I'd much rather have a conversation and ask some questions around challenges and kind of figure out my way from there. So Naked Consulting. I'm really inspired by big personalities in the tech space. So Satya Nadella's Refresh book is amazing. Just the way he talks about, reframing and being a refounder, amazing concepts. Resonate hugely with me because I work in a really long legacy, company with a really long legacy. I think Datacom is founded in 1965, so really, really long legacy, and has had to navigate quite a few changes over time. So that refounder concept really resonates with me, and Steve Jobs and his biography, very interesting personality, and I was listening to there was an interview with his with Lorraine, his wife, his widow now, and Johnny Ive and Tim Cook. And it's super interesting, kind of the perceptions of the person and the way his mind works, and I just find that incredibly intriguing. Just the way people's brains work is really intriguing for me.
That's so cool. 3 favorite smells?
3 favorite smells. The smell of my children. I don't think I talked enough about my family today, and I probably, they're one of the main things that kind of, they're a massive pillar of meaning and purpose in my life. So, the smell of my children, I love to give them kisses all the time, and that smell is one of my favorite smells. Coffee has to be there. It's got to be up there in terms of favorite smells. I'm still a big foodie, so I've been recently getting more and more into slow cooked meat on barbecues. So that's been one of my favorite smells.
There's nothing quite like it, eh? What makes you laugh?
I think comedy that points at the kind of satire comedy is really great for me. I watch all the Stephen Colbert and Trevor Noah and John Oliver and Jon Stewart, and even in the Middle East there was a really big personality called Bassem Youssef, who only had a really short sprint during the Egyptian revolution and the Arab Spring, where he had a YouTube channel, and then he got a show, and great satirist. So satire is really cool because it kind of, I think comedy in general is something that I love, especially comedy that points at the flaws
Yep.
of things that people take way too seriously. You know, whether it's politics, whether it's weird things about traditions as well. I think having that balance, even though I value tradition, having the balance of not getting too serious about it.
Yeah.
I think is really cool.
Yeah.
So it's satire, comedy in general, make me laugh, and can't think of a third thing.
No, you don't have to have three for that.
Yeah.
That's fine. That's a good one. First job.
First job would have been, I guess, my first job was in New Zealand doing paper runs over here.
Oh,
so
it's a common theme, eh? That's a common first job in New Zealanders.
Probably, yeah. It's pretty low key. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't have an interesting story on my first job. Yeah.
Do you have any favourite pick-me-up songs that you like to listen to, or favourite musicians?
My music taste is really strange because I grew up. So I have one sister, and my sister is 9 years older than I am.
Wow.
And she's a massive inspiration of mine as well. She lives in the UK. She's somebody you should interview.
Side note.
She's much brainier than I am. She's a professor in dentistry. And,
oh wow.
she heads up the Pediatric Dental Society in the UK.
Wow.
And, she's amazing. But she was a huge influence in terms of pop culture for me as I was growing up, and so a lot of Arabic and Middle Eastern music was a big part of my upbringing. And then I came to New Zealand, and it was like, oh my God, what do people listen to here? Because what you see on TV, which is how I learned English when I came to New Zealand, is very different to what people, the diversity of music that people listen to.
Yeah.
So that's a really long way of saying I don't really have go-to artists. I depending on my mood, I might listen to Arabic music, or I might listen to. I really love actually rap and hip hop.
Nice.
Because I like the expression of identity through music that comes with it. Those are probably my
nice eclectic. I love that. That's me too. Three things you're grateful for today.
Grateful for the fact that we've got this time to chat and to be able to share just a little bit about the journey and lessons that I've learned. I'm grateful for a lot of things, really. I'm super grateful for my health and my family's health. That's something that that is really important for me. Having had to restart life with my mum and dad a couple of times, money is not something I'm fussed about, but I am grateful for the fact that I've got the ability to provide for my family and for my kids, and that's something I'm grateful for every day.
Magic. Favorite concert?
God, I haven't been to a concert in ages.
Neither. None of us have.
I'll probably replace that with a comedy show.
Yeah.
Michael McIntyre.
Ah, yeah.
He's hilarious.
Yeah.
He's hilarious, especially the jokes about parents and kids and living with that.
On point.
Absolutely on point. So he's my favorite comedian. We watched him the last time he was here, which I think it was just before the pandemic, I think. Was it during the pandemic? I don't know.
Can't remember anymore.
Yeah.
So it's all a blur.
Yeah, that would be my favorite gig.
No, favorite gig. I should change that. Hobbies.
I love spending time with my kids and just spending time with friends actually as well. So that that relationship side of things is and people interaction is really important.
Fostering that.
Coffee is a big hobby of mine.
I want to see evidence of this award later. Like, you can send it to us.
Yeah.
How do you win this?
It's hanging up. So the story behind the coffee thing is my wife and I, when we bought our first home, we were trying to save money, and so I used to drink a lot of coffee. So I said, maybe I can buy a coffee machine. She's like, oh my God, here we go. He's going to buy this thing and it's going to sit down on the shelf for the next, few years. And a friend of mine runs some cafes, and he said, I can lend you one of those small domestic coffee machines. And I just got super obsessed with it. I YouTubed the crap out of everything and kind of got super obsessed with coffee. And everybody used to come over to my house and go, oh man, you make great coffee. And then I was looking to replace a part on the coffee machine, and came up on this competition for the Home Barista of the Year that Atomic were running in Auckland. And my wife goes to me, oh, you should enter. I'm like, nah, I'm not good enough to be in these things. And then a friend of mine called me up a couple of weeks later, and he goes, hey, have you heard about this competition? I'm like, actually, yeah, I saw it the other day. He goes, I've got a guy with me at work who's going in to compete. He's like, you make way better coffee than he does. So he's like, you should definitely compete. So yeah, I went in and competed, and ended up winning, and that earned me bench space in the kitchen, and dedicated space for my coffee, which was a very hot debate beforehand as to
if that was going to be allowed to happen.
Yeah, that's right.
That was gold. What does a recovery day look like for you, or a lazy day at home?
A recovery day is a day where I don't have to worry about time. Mm-hmm. That's the biggest thing. Like not having things that are planned, and having this urge to get up and go somewhere or whatever. Just letting time pass by and being able to just enjoy being, which we don't do. No. Enough. Our days are packed with meetings and appointments and stress. So yeah, my recovery time is.
Where time is irrelevant.
Time is irrelevant.
I love that. Last one: qualities you love about yourself.
Loyalty. I feel a deep sense of loyalty to people, be it my family, my friends, my community, the different communities that I'm part of. And I value that, and I get that you can't be too attached to some of these things and things like that, but that's something that I value, and I think that's a really good thing to value. I think my journey of discovery and kind of taking on multiple perspectives and having a struggle. It's funny, again, offshoot, but in the Western world, since 9/11, the word jihad became a very, very negative term. Because it's associated with terror and war and things like that. In the Islamic faith, jihad is primarily the meaning of the word is struggle, and it is the struggle against oneself. Like that is the primary form of it, as this acknowledgement that all of us have this internal struggle to do better and improve ourselves and improve the world around us, and the acknowledgement of the fact that this is a struggle and a journey, and life is a struggle. That's a very fundamental concept in the faith. Unfortunately, it's been propagated to only be, there is a form of jihad which is actually oriented around self-defense. So if a community is attacked, your ability to defend yourself is acknowledged as a struggle, but the core struggle is called jihad an-nafs, which is the struggle with oneself. That's like at the heart of the religion and faith. So yeah, that's something that I really, I think people today's world pushes everybody to be happy, and this concept of happiness, and it's really very oriented around individual happiness. And I think there's not enough focus on the struggle and being okay with the struggle to be happy. Like happiness is not a place that you get to and kind of go, yeah, I'm here now, I've arrived. It's in the struggle to kind of do better and do something meaningful. So that's a really neat quality that I embrace.
That's magic. Well, this has been outstanding. I can't wait to share this interview with other people. This is just going to be amazing, and there are so many takeaways that I can't even begin to do them, but I think the biggest one, if I could boil everything down today, is just being present and paying attention, and the kindness that comes back into the communities that we need to keep pushing back in, and we need to understand everyone in our community. We need to pay attention to what's going on, and we need to use our voices. If we've got the ability to use it and be able to be heard, then use it to help others. So thank you so much. And
thank you for allowing me to have my voice be heard.
You. And I can't wait for all of you to see it, and I can't wait to hear what you think. So we'll see you for now. Ka kite.